You can't use an accent. Reading through the responses on my post from yesterday, I was reminded of another instance of MC from my days at Ticket Nation. After you have taken a couple hundred calls, a week or two of work really, it can get boring. And boredom leads to finding ways to entertain yourself. One of my coworkers decided that he was going to entertain himself by putting on an accent to see how the customers reacted. While I admit he chose poorly, he decided to imitate an Indian accent and started taking calls. He was loving it. After a call or two, however, his team lead overheard him and asked what he was doing and told him to stop. The next day an email was sent out forbidding us from using anything other than our natural accents while we were on the phone. Now, I was living in South Texas at the time and have a fairly average American accent with a bit of Texan mixed in. But I have family in East Texas and Central and Northeast Arkansas. And when I was little I spoke like them. And so I had an idea. The next day, my opening went from, "Thank you for calling Ticket Nation customer service. This is astrolegium. How may I help you today?" to, "Thank you for calling Ticket Nation customer service. Is astrolegium. How can I help you today?" Needless to say, I was quickly noticed and pulled off the phones by my team lead. He asked me if I had read the email, which I confirmed. And then he went on to ask why, if I had read the email, I was using an accent. The look of utter confusion on his face when I told him I'm not was priceless. After a bit of back and forth, I told him that I was raised speaking like I had been on those calls, and that the accent that they were used to hearing me take calls in was, in fact, not my natural accent. And since I didn't want to get written up, I had complied by reverting to the one that was. He wasn't sure how to respond at first, and even went to speak with a manager above him, but kept me off the phones while he figured out how they wanted to proceed. A few minutes later they came back and told me that they wanted me to go back to my professional accent. But I told them that it would be setting a bad example to the rest of the team since we don't want anyone using an accent that isn't their natural accent either. They were stumped on how to proceed, and sent me back to the phones. I continued to take calls with my natural accent after that, and a few of my peers started noticing, and a few of them even joined in by abandoning their Americanized accents in favor of their native Mexican accents. It was glorious. In the end, management decided to roll back the rule and only asked us to keep in one accent throughout the call, and not to use an accent that is derogatory demeaning. I went back to my normal accent and my teammate went back to using a different accent on each call. Thinking back on it, I should have invited him to my D&D group. He would have made a great dungeon master. Way back when I worked for 1800 Pet Meds, one of the worst jobs I ever had, I also got bored. And since I'm able to, I started answering calls in different accents. First Southern, then English, then Russian, Romanian, etc. for about 10 calls in a row, different each time. At that point a team lead came to talk to me. Turns out the training class that day was listening to live calls to get a feel for how calls can go, and we're doing 2 calls per rep before moving on. They happened to pick mine right when I started my boredom fix. My normal accent is a mix of Southern and New Yorker, because of my parents. Mom is from Georgia, stepdad from Bronx, so my voice bounces between both sometimes in one sentence. So the team lead didn't think it weird when I was all "hey y'all" for the first call. However, when the second call I went Posh Spice, it threw them for a loop. As a result, it seems the class listened to all 10 calls before they took a break and I got a talking to. The calls were all handled correctly, so I wasn't in trouble. But the class was told never to actually do that themselves. I was told never to do it again. Even if I did stay on script and pleasant the whole time. I'm from Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK, so have a Geordie accent. Technically it's a dialect, I believe. I adapt this when I'm living abroad, and most of my international friends from places like Denmark, Czech Republic, Lithuania etc. could tell my accent was a little different but perfectly understand me. Cue me answering a call from my mam in from of then and reverting back to full Geordiness. Their faces were an absolute picture. Especially when this sentence came out at lightning fast speed. I am aving a canny time. Took a gander by the river. Had a deeks in the shops and now we're gonna get mortal the night. Quote. I have a British, English, accent, but I live in a country where most English speakers come from America. And most of the TV shows and movies are American. At university I became good friends with someone who grew up in Scotland. But her accent tended to adapt to the person she was talking to. So she sounded English when talking to me. I introduced her to my best friend, whose accent also adapted to the person he was speaking to. He mostly learned English from TV and me. So his accent usually went between American and English. It was glorious. I think they cycled through every possible English-speaking accent in a few minutes of conversation. They went posh English, Cockney, Scottish, American, Australian, Irish, and even sounded Welsh and South African for a bit. I found it hilarious. And later he told me that it was really frustrating talking to her, because she wasn't giving him any accent feedback for him to latch onto. She has since moved back to the UK, and we've lost touch. I think I'll try to reconnect with her. She was a good friend. And it's been ages since we last spoke. A South Africa doctor, living in Canada, was using voice dictation in his practice. He told me that he had to use the Canadian accent on the word can't because in his native accent, it came out as a very unfortunate four-letter word. I grew up in Brighton, on the south coast of England. I don't consider I have much of an accent. It's not a recognized accent like Cockney, Yorkshire, Scots, etc. Just, well, English. In the early 1980s, when I had been living in an adjacent county for about 10 years, I visited Vancouver to advise some people at UBC. On my last day, I went sightseeing. I got on the bus with some colleagues. I was traveling further than them, so they explained where I should alight. A nice man behind us, with an English accent, offered to direct me as he would still be on the bus. We got chatting, as you do. After a bit, he suddenly said, "You're from Brighton, aren't you?" Quote. He had lived in Canada for 25 years. Unrelated, but funny. My English wife tried to order a glass of water in an Alabama restaurant when we were visiting my family there. Wife. A glass of water, please. Posh English accent. Waitress. Excuse me? Repeat. With same response. I finally translated wife's request into Alabama, adding, "She talks funny." Quote. I'm so glad other people did this. I worked in a call center in the UK for 5 years. So after a while we also ended up running through Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Yorkshire, Cockney, West Country accents. Nobody seemed to notice. Funnily enough, that period coincided with a period of time where a scammer was calling who was trying to use people's accounts to order things to their address. She got wise to our normal accents, so I would change mine when I saw it was her number coming through. Once it got to a certain point I'd change back and say, "All calls are being recorded," and she'd slam the phone down. The worst part is that I left the company before we found out who she was. I grew up in Florida. Kind of a mixing pot of accents, so not really discernible. My father's family came from Ga and have that southern twang which I apparently picked up when I was younger. When I'm around southern people it comes out a little more. This being said, when I moved to TN I could understand the southern drawl of the accents. Until I went to a restaurant and ordered sweet tea. I did a double take when the waitress asked me if I wanted ass in my tea. Spoiler. She was asking if I wanted ice in my tea. I realized at that point that the TN accent and the Ga accent that I was used to were different. I'm from Newcastle and had a car insurance call from a gentleman with an extremely strong Welsh accent. He wanted me to cover his car until a year from May. I repeated his request back to him. He said, "No. Until year from May." This went on for a few minutes until I had a light bulb moment. He was saying, "Hear from me." I also had a Scot saying his name was Mac. I asked how it was spelt. Mark. Cue the Scottish voice-activated elevator skit. I was driving through Tennessee and diverted through Alabama around 2005. I had been driving all night and needed lots of coffee and some nice flaky biscuits. My problem with this scenario is that I am born and raised in the North Shore of Boston, Massachusetts. I was very tired and due to the fatigue I was unable to understand the rural northern Alabama dialect. I apologized. Spoke slowly and apologetically that I was tired and because of this I was unable to understand her. She looked like I was putting her on. I repeated that I was not kidding. I truly did not understand. I apologized again and smiled the best I could. The coffee lasted an hour and the 6 biscuits lasted all day. In a way, I want to give you crap for not interpreting the spirit of the memo, which is to not do over-the-top, stereotypically racist accents. But I get why you did it. I have a noticeable accent when I talk normally. But I do try to enunciate better so older people can understand me better. Sometimes I drop the enunciation and I sound like I'm run on sentencing everything. One day I got a complaint that I talk too fast and I can't be understood clearly. So I just pointed out that that's how I talk and I can't guarantee it won't happen again, and if they try to write me up for it, I'll call the local labor board. They shut up after that. They probably should have worded it something like, use a neutral accent, rather than your natural accent, also called standard, general, or broadcast American. The accent was on MC in this story, my favorite kind. Y'all have fun, now. Wait. Someone tried to imitate an Indian accent out of boredom and poor taste, so you decided to change your regular speaking voice to make waves? Had a similar rule out in place at a Comcast call center. I just took the first call in my natural rural Alabama accent and pretty much had the exact same talk with my supervisor. I have a professional voice that is generic American with a bit of Southern where I can't help it. My natural rural Alabama accent which summons banjos. And my radio voice, which just sounds like every ATC ever. As well as all my D&D voices. This type of policy is either reactionary like Ops Post, or in my case done by someone who has never actually been in the position. I wish call centers had voice acting in onboarding. I try my damnedest, but some people I just cannot understand because of their accent. I don't expect random people to change their accent for me. But if your job is to communicate with people in a specific region and more than a few times people haven't been able to understand you, Just do some voice acting classes in YouTube. If I can suppress Alabama trailer park, you can suppress whatever. I work at a help desk at a company in the Pacific Northwest. Many of our employees are in Texas, and over the last few years I've slowly been working on my Texas accent. My wife is from Texas. Since I'm working from home, she's heard it and doesn't enjoy it. But she does help by letting me know when I'm veering off into a different Southern accent and will teach me how to pronounce things. I've learned that it works best if I don't go full Texan. Never go full Texan. I go maybe 30% Texan, and that's enough to get asked if I am from Texas. So your coworker was being racist by doing stereotypical Indian accent for shits and giggles. It's easy to tell when someone is faking it. And when manager reacted accordingly, you decided to be a dick about it. Good for you. When I was in the US Navy, our boat visited France. I got into a conversation with a French sailor, and he said he visited America. He said when he visited the South, he couldn't understand a thing people were saying. That gave me an idea. I spoke some French, so I could hear people on the French metro making fun of the Americans on the train. I could also tell they understood what we were saying to each other. From then on, our group spoke with our best, Lower Alabama, accent when in public. Every single word was a twang. That completely stopped them from understanding a thing we said. Mocking foreign accents while on the phone with customers is racist and unprofessional. And the way you responded to your boss asking the entire office to stop is childish as fuck.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.